Bangladesh, a nation known for its vibrant culture and economic progress, finds itself grappling with political turmoil. Recent events have shaken the nation, culminating in the surprise resignation of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. At the heart of this unrest are widespread student protests, fueled by a controversial quota system for government jobs. These protests, met with a heavy-handed government response, have brought to light deep-seated frustrations within Bangladeshi society. The situation in Bangladesh is complex, stemming from a confluence of factors including socioeconomic disparities, political polarization, and a history of student activism. To understand the current crisis, it's crucial to delve into the origins of the protests, the role of the quota system, and the government's response. The resignation of Hasina, a towering figure in Bangladeshi politics, marks a pivotal moment in the nation's history, raising questions about the future of governance and stability.
Central to the unrest in Bangladesh is the long-standing quota system for government jobs, which has been a source of contention for decades. This system, implemented after the country's independence in 1971, reserves a significant percentage of government positions for specific groups, including marginalized communities, ethnic minorities, and the descendants of Liberation War veterans. The intention behind the quota system was to uplift these historically disadvantaged groups and ensure their representation in the public sector, providing them with opportunities that were previously inaccessible. The system aimed to create a more inclusive and equitable society by addressing historical injustices and offering a level playing field for all citizens. However, critics argue that the quota system has created a system of reverse discrimination, where meritocracy is sidelined in favor of quotas, leading to frustration among those who feel unfairly excluded. They contend that this system has led to inefficiency, corruption, and a sense of injustice among those who are excluded from its benefits. Many believe that the quota system has outlived its purpose and needs to be reformed to reflect the current socio-economic realities. Over the years, the quota system has become a contentious issue, with periodic protests and demands for reform. These protests have often been led by students and young professionals who feel that their future prospects are being compromised. The current wave of protests, while sparked by the quota system, reflects a broader sense of discontent among Bangladesh's youth. They are not just protesting the quota system, but are also voicing their frustrations about the overall lack of opportunities and systemic issues. They highlight growing concerns about unemployment, inequality, and a lack of opportunities. The youth are demanding a fairer system that rewards merit and hard work, rather than one that is perceived as biased and unjust. The quota system has become a lightning rod for these grievances, symbolizing a system perceived as rigged against those who don't fit into specific categories. The protests are a call for a more transparent and fair system that can provide equal opportunities for all citizens, regardless of their background.
The recent protests erupted in April 2023, spearheaded by students from public universities across Bangladesh. These students, driven by a sense of urgency and a desire for change, took to the streets in large numbers. Initially, peaceful demonstrations quickly escalated into violent clashes with law enforcement. The tension between the students and the authorities grew as the days went by, leading to several confrontations. Students took to the streets, demanding reforms to the quota system, which they argued unfairly limited their job prospects in a highly competitive job market. The quota system, they claimed, was a significant barrier to their future careers. These protests were fueled by a deep sense of frustration and anger among young people who felt that the quota system was holding them back. The discontent had been simmering for years, and the protests were a manifestation of their pent-up grievances. Many argued that their hard work and academic achievements were being undermined by a system that prioritized quotas over merit. They believed that meritocracy should be the guiding principle in job placements and educational opportunities. Social media played a crucial role in mobilizing support for the protests, with students using online platforms to organize demonstrations, share information, and amplify their demands. The digital age allowed them to reach a wider audience and gather more support. The protests sent shockwaves through Bangladesh as students from all walks of life united in their opposition to the quota system. This unity showcased the widespread discontent and the collective desire for a fairer system. The scale and intensity of the demonstrations took many by surprise, highlighting the deep-seated resentment against a system that many perceived as unfair and outdated. The government's response to these protests would be crucial in determining the future direction of the country's policies and the students' trust in their leaders.
It's important to note that the current protests are not an isolated incident, but rather the latest chapter in a long-standing debate over the quota system in Bangladesh. Since its implementation, the system has been a source of contention, with periodic protests and demands for reform. In the 1980s and 1990s, student-led movements successfully pressured the government to reduce quota reservations. However, these reforms proved insufficient to quell the underlying grievances. The current wave of protests reflects the failure to address the systemic issues that continue to fuel resentment and frustration among those who feel disadvantaged by the quota system. The government's initial response to the protests was dismissive, with officials downplaying the concerns of the protesters and accusing them of being manipulated by opposition forces.
The government's response to the protests was initially characterized by a heavy-handed approach. Security forces used tear gas, rubber bullets, and water cannons to disperse us, resulting in numerous injuries and arrests. The streets were filled with chaos as people ran for cover, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of tear gas. The scenes of violence and the cries of the injured painted a grim picture of the government's stance.
They also tried to restrict internet access and social media platforms, aiming to curb the spread of information and disrupt the organization of protests. But, these tactics only served to further inflame tensions and galvanize public support for us. People found ways to communicate despite the blackout, using VPNs and other tools to stay connected. The determination to keep the movement alive was palpable.
As international condemnation of the government's crackdown grew, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina announced a series of concessions, including a review of the quota system. The international media coverage brought global attention to our plight, putting additional pressure on the government to act. However, the promises made by the Prime Minister were met with skepticism.
These concessions, however, were seen by many of us as too little, too late, and failed to appease the protesters who continued to demand the complete abolition of the quota system. The banners and slogans reflected our unwavering resolve. The streets remained filled with voices calling for justice and equality, showing that partial measures were not enough.
The government's handling of the protests drew widespread criticism from human rights groups and international observers, who accused the government of using excessive force and suppressing dissent. Reports and statements from these groups highlighted the severity of the situation, calling for immediate action to protect the rights of the protesters.
The crackdown on protesters served to erode public trust in the government and raise concerns about shrinking democratic space in Bangladesh. The images of protesters being arrested and the heavy-handed tactics used by the police were broadcasted worldwide, painting a stark picture of the challenges faced by those fighting for their rights. The defiance shown by the protesters, even in the face of such adversity, became a symbol of the struggle for democracy and justice.
In a significant development, Bangladesh's Supreme Court upheld a previous ruling that declared the existing quota system unconstitutional. The court ruled that the quota system, in its current form, violated the principle of equality enshrined in the Constitution. This verdict was seen as a major victory for the protesters and added further fuel to the fire. The government, caught between a rock and a hard place, faced mounting pressure to implement the court's ruling and abolish the quota system. However, doing so risked alienating powerful interest groups that benefited from the system. The government's dilemma highlighted the deep-seated nature of the issue and the challenges in finding a solution that would satisfy all parties. The Supreme Court's verdict injected a new layer of complexity into an already volatile situation. It remained to be seen how the government would navigate this delicate balancing act and what impact the ruling would have on the future of the quota system and the protests themselves.
The path forward remains uncertain and fraught with challenges. The government's response to the Supreme Court's ruling will be crucial in determining the future of the quota system and the broader political landscape in Bangladesh. The protests have highlighted the need for meaningful reforms and greater accountability. Moving forward, it will be essential for the government to engage in genuine dialogue with all stakeholders to find a sustainable solution. The international community will also play a key role in supporting Bangladesh through this period of transition. Continued pressure and support from global actors can help ensure that the rights and aspirations of the people are respected. Ultimately, the way forward will require a delicate balancing act, addressing the concerns of the protesters while maintaining stability and social cohesion.
The events in Bangladesh have underscored the power of collective action and the importance of upholding democratic principles. As the country navigates this tumultuous period, the resilience and determination of its people will be crucial in shaping a more just and equitable future. The journey ahead will not be easy, but with continued efforts and support, there is hope for meaningful change. The story of the protests is a testament to the enduring spirit of those who dare to dream of a better tomorrow. Thank you for joining us as we explored this pivotal moment in Bangladesh's history. Stay informed, stay engaged, and remember that every voice matters.